We're a month removed from the Guardians draft, obviously, but we're going to look back at it with a good friend of the show, everyone's favorite guest, Geoff Pontes from Baseball America, and we'll talk Guardians prospects as well.
You are Locked On Guardians, your daily podcast on the Cleveland Guardians. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's show. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnMLB. Use the code all lowercase LockedOnMLB for first deposit match up to $100.
I can't believe it's been a month since the draft already, but today we're going to talk, looking back at it with Geoff Pontes of Baseball America. We'll talk about Travis Bazzana. We'll get into his debut so far. We'll talk about some other Guardians draft stuff, and we'll also talk about some interesting prospects in Lake County as things are getting super fun in Lake County as we end the minor league season.
For those of you who do not know me, I am Jeff Ellis, one of your two co-hosts here. Before I worked at Locked On, where I was one of the first Major League Baseball hosts they brought on. I was a draft and prospect analyst at Scout and 24/7. And before that, I was your 23rd favorite sports writer at every Cleveland sports blog that has or will exist.
23rd. I can't figure that one out. That'll be interesting. I'm Justin Latta. Nobody cares where I've written before, but it's been Guardians Baseball Insider, the News Herald, the Morning Journal, and Prospects Live, where I met this guy, Geoff Pontes, who everyone wants to hear anyway and have us shut up, because every time he's on, everyone's like, man, this guy's got the best stuff, and we should shut up and just let him talk more. So we always bring Geoff back on, and it just so happens he is in our neck of the woods this week looking at Lake County and in Great Lakes for some looks from Baseball America. Geoff, thank you for, first of all, taking the time, because you're on a road trip right now. You got to see 14 innings on Thursday, and you've been doing a lot this year. And
I'm missing all the nightlife in Eastlake, Ohio right now.
There's so much. Hey, at least we converted you to Swenson's, right? Swenson's in and out. You got to pick now.
I would say like the full menu, it's easily Swenson's. Burger wise, I think the burger at In-N-Out still maybe a tier above. But it's a good burger. You know, so my rankings are and I've eaten all of this honestly in the last like month. So as far as like burger chains, I think like my 60s or I guess I could even push it on to a 70, but it's probably Shake Shack, Five Guys, In-N-Out is how I rank it out. There's some additional boost that goes with Five Guys just because of the French fries. I think they have incredible fries. I love their fries. Though my wife hates them. When she was pregnant with my first son, the Five Guys opened up next to my house. I went and I got some Five Guys. I brought it home and it made her actually vomit. So now every time she smells Five Guys, like it makes her throw up. So I have to get it with the kids when she's at work. That's the only time I can eat Five Guys. But either way, continuing on down, I would put Swenson's in that like 55 range. You know, I think it's a good burger. I think the potato teasers. I keep making the same mistake. Those are excellent. I just got them on a whim last night because anything on a menu that looks like I've never heard of it and I'm in a foreign land, I'm like, I'm going to order that. And it was incredible. Then you suggested to get the ranch. I went back tonight, got another burger, and got the potato teasers with the ranch. It was an excellent combination. And also the California special, the grape, like soda, icy. That was excellent. Quite refreshing on a hottish day. So then moving down, I think it's like Wendy's, McDonald's, Whataburger. I think Whataburger is awful. And then Burger King. I think Whataburger is Burger King. And I gave it a shot in Texas. I ate it at multiple locations because I was like, my first one was like so disappointing that I went back and got another one. Man, Texas has a lot to be proud of, especially when it comes to food. I don't know what they're talking about with Whataburger. I had an In-N-Out burger later the same day after my second Whataburger, and it was like a body slam. Like it wasn't close. So I have these are my burger chain tiers. I don't know if Shake Shack is probably like a 55. Excuse me, Steak and Shake is probably a 55. I really like Steak and Shake when I had it in Florida. So people don't like it, but for some reason,
I like it.
I had a really good example.
I've always enjoyed it. Maybe it's because I always eat it past midnight when it's like the place that's open, but it's like, give me a plate of cheese fries and a burger and I'm pretty happy, and a milkshake at like 1 a.m.
I got a burger and a milkshake and I thought the fries were fine.
I mean, they are little straw things, but that's why I want cheese on them. But
yeah, that wasn't my favorite. There was, you would have been happy because there actually used to be a Steak Shake, Jeff, not far from where you're staying while you're visiting, and I think I'm scarred from it because it was just the worst establishment I've ever been to. So maybe that's why I have a low opinion of it. But I don't know. I had In-N-Out. I went to spring training in Arizona for the first time earlier in February or March, and I had In-N-Out for the first time. And I will say In-N-Out's pretty good. But you're right, full menu. Swenson's kicks butt.
Oh yeah, there's just so much more. Like,
yeah,
In-N-Out's kind of limited, but it's good and it's cheap. That's the thing, is I'm always kind of surprised. Like, it's cheaper than McDonald's around me every time I've been to In-N-Out in Arizona.
That is wild.
Yeah.
Well, while you were in Texas eating some Whataburgers and something else, you were covering the draft. Barbecue, yeah, Texas barbecue. I'm sure was the better way to go.
Yes.
Jeff and I were convinced that there's no way they didn't know they were taking Travis Bazzana coming into Sunday at the draft, but that whole thing played out really wild. How surprised were you that it feels like it came down to the wire, and then for what he ended up signing for, which ended up being less than Condon and Chase Burns, who got the same amount of money, and how that all worked out? How surprised by that whole scenario are you?
Not surprised. I think that it's a reflection of who this guy is. I think he wanted to be the number one pick. I think looking at the options, I think he liked the fact that he was going to a team that's competitive, has a history of being competitive, over the last, 10 years. And 2 of the last 3 seasons have been pretty good years. I think it's a better program. I know they're analytical as well. I'm sure that was a selling point for Travis. And, I think in the big scheme of things, the money, it's like he still got close to $9 million. Like, it's, the difference in money in the big scheme of things, it's like, how much can you earn? Can you get to the big leagues quicker? Is it an organization that is going to develop you better? And I think that was probably the biggest selling point. I had heard the night before the draft from people that it was going to be Bazzana. We didn't change our mock because I don't do the mock, but that's probably what I would have mocked out, was Bazzana going 1. I just always thought it was a good fit. And I felt as if among those players, going number 1, being the first Australian player to go number 1 in the draft, I think it was just one of those things that, the money probably, the difference in money probably didn't mean as much, just from like a personal pride standpoint. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. Like, I think this is a guy that wants to be a winner, wants to achieve, wants to have, the weight of the world on his back. I think you've even seen that as he struggled a little bit over the last week or so. Just, trying to get the big hit. Like, I think that's kind of where it is. And, I think the other thing too, and I haven't talked to him personally about this, so I don't know, but they're kind of resting him. They're not playing him every day. I think you mentioned it the other day, we were at the park, that first time he played back-to-back was last week. He played back-to-back today. He's not in the lineup tomorrow. So, I think some of that probably like irks him a little bit. He's a guy that wants to be in the lineup every single day, and kind of had conversations with the team, at least from my understanding, that like he was ready to go. Like, after he signed, he was like, I'm ready to go. I want to get out to an affiliate. I want to play. Where, some other guys might have taken it a little bit slower, and organizations might have handled it a little bit differently. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure we'll talk about it a little bit, but I think some of the panic that's been online over the last week has just been completely overblown based on sample sizes and just looking at batting averages, because even like the OPS like isn't that bad for someone who's struggled and, first taste of pro ball, all those sort of things. Yeah, I mean, he's had a couple of hard hit balls over the last couple of days. He's gotten on base quite a bit over the last 2 days. And, when he's on base, scores runs, takes the extra base, will steal bases. He does all those little things. He's just a good all-around ball player, and I think he'll endear himself to this fan base shortly. So just a matter of being, kind of patient. But yeah, I think, overall, it's not a huge shock that he went 1-1 just because of his makeup and just the kind of person that he is. That I think he wanted that distinction,
No, I think it makes a lot of sense, right? Like we heard so much about how he kind of wants to help put Australia on the map. So do you think it was, I guess my question in that way is like, was it equal parts the cachet of being one and equal parts Cleveland in the organization? Or do you think one maybe was higher? Or you just think both those parts is why, we saw the reports that he agreed to take less than other teams offered more than that amount?
Yeah.
Do you think it was equal parts on those things?
Yeah. I mean, I think so without going into it. I mean, you had one of the least analytical teams in the game in the Rockies. I just don't think he would have fit in with that organization and would have fit in with player development. So I think that was probably a big part of it. And I think, being the distinction of, an Australian that goes 1-1 in the draft and kind of putting Australia on the map. He's a guy that's really supportive of other Australian players. You can get him if you get him talking about Curtis Mead, he'll talk your ear off about Curtis Mead for 5 minutes. I mean, he knows the players that, are in Australia and I think wants to grow the game. I think that's something that's inside of him too. I can't tell you, the percentages of like what the decision was. I could ask him tomorrow when we chat. I'm not sure he'd give me a straight answer, to be honest with you. But I'm sure that Cleveland being analytical was very attractive to this guy because he's someone that's into the numbers, wants feedback, wants to use tech and get good instruction from people who think that way, are very forward progressive thinking when it comes to baseball. So I would imagine that was a big part of why the Guardians made sense for him.
Yeah, people don't realize that a lot of draft picks like Travis Bazzana and those guys get to kind of pick their destination, so to speak. It's a much more open process than even I ever realized. So, I think people miss on that a little bit with the draft.
Well, I think because we're so conditioned from the NFL and the NBA draft to like the best player goes first. Like it goes in that order, right? And there's no real negotiating, like bargaining leverage that any of these prospects have in those two leagues outside of saying like, I'm not going to sign with you. Like you have to pull the Eli Manning or like, get drafted and then traded. Like it's kind of one of those things that you got to be able to do something like that to really pull that off, or a sign and trade with picks or whatever. That like the good thing about baseball, I think, is these guys do have some negotiating leverage and maybe even go later in the draft to get more money and the bonus pools and how all that stuff works. It's an interesting dynamic. And I think it makes following the MLB draft the most fun of all the drafts, to be honest with you, because there's so much nuance with it that there isn't necessarily like with the NFL draft or the NBA draft, where it's drafting the best player available or drafting for need. The other thing is in those sports, those guys go right into the lineup. NBA draft lottery picks are at least the 6th or 7th man in that team. If they're not starting day one, they're probably starting day one. NFL, I mean, your first 3 picks are probably starting in the NFL. Like 3rd, 4th rounders come in and like, are rookie, all rookie team guys all the time. In baseball, you have to earn it, and I think that's what's frustrating for fans too, is like, we could follow this, but like this guy may not hit. And then like, it's 2 or 3 years, maybe even 4 or 5 with prep pitchers until we even get a sniff of them in the major leagues. Right. Like it's a very different process, but I also think it's what makes baseball cool is you kind of got to earn your job. You're not going to, you could sign for $5 million and get stuck in A-ball for 3 years. Like that happens all the time. I mean, we can go look at the position players the Marlins have drafted over the last 10 years. And there's a bunch of those stories, Yeah.
Well, we'll talk more about some of those prep pitchers. I think we've covered Bazzana pretty good at this point. So we'll talk more about some of the draft. We'll talk more about some Guardians prospects and some looks in Lake County and some other spots there coming up here soon. Well, hey, whether you're taking in 14 innings of baseball, a lot of baseball left in this season, whether it's minor league or major league, when you're in America's pastime, don't forget to hydrate with Liquid IV's Popsicle Firecracker flavor. It is a sure, fire summer hit. I talked about it. My wedding last year, we had to use liquid IV all week to get us ready to set up for the wedding, have fun at the wedding, and tear down. We did a backyard wedding, had to do it all of ourselves. It was a hot week, so we had to be prepared, and that really helped us out to recover very well and be able to take care of all the things we needed to. So came in clutch there. Terraport, live more, 1 stick plus 16 ounces of water hydrates better than water alone. No more thirsty summers when you indulge in hydration with Liquid IV. Get 20% off your first order of Liquid IV when you go to liquidiv.com. Use code MLB at checkout. That's 20% off your first order when you shop better tasting hydration today. Use promo code MLB at liquidiv.com. And after you're done watching this podcast, check out Locked On MLB. Our pal Sully will have you covered on all the pennant races, all the division stuff going on, the best record in the league, the Guardians. I'm sure he'll talk about that. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Right now, we're talking with Geoff Pontes from Baseball America. Does a lot of great work on the draft and prospects. You can also catch him on Foul Territory. They have the hot sheet over there. I've been watching you guys on the hot sheet recently. That's been a lot of fun over there to watch. Life is good over there. I can see that. What any of your thoughts that you have on the Guardians draft in general? Because we're talking about some of the prep pitchers. A lot of, they went prep heavy. What do you think about the approach they took there to all those prep pitchers and what they came away with on the board?
Yeah, and I think we've kind of seen them go in that direction the last couple of years, which is kind of divergent from the amount of college starters that they had taken prior to that. But they've gotten some return on it. We saw them turn over a couple of those high school picks from recent years, into players here. The name that I'm most excited about, and I think Guardians PD is most excited about, is Braylon Dowdy that they took in the second round. It's really big stuff. He's been up to the mid to high 90s with the fastball, like 95 and 96. He's got a couple of different breaking ball shapes that are super high spin. There's a lot of really nice ingredients here. And I just, I'd heard some whispers and conversations that, Guardian PD was really excited about working with this particular player. So yeah, I think Dowdy is probably the headliner there. Of course you went and they grabbed, Joe Yoki in the third round. Another guy that, I think it's more of like a sinker two seamer type of guy, more like low to mid 90s. I think maybe mixes in a four seamer as well. I haven't seen as much of the high school guys. And a decent slider. So there's some ingredients there too. I know he's another name that people are excited about. A little bit taller guy, a little bit more projection, but they had a bunch of guys here that the top of the draft where they kind of spread the money that they saved at the top pick around to a few different spots to sign players for, multi-million-dollar deals, which is interesting. Yeah. I think those two guys are probably like the big headliners. And then you have, a couple other ones in like Cameron Sullivan. They drafted out of Indiana. Actually, that was an underslot pick as well. I didn't see as much of him. I don't see as much of the prep guys as I see the college guys, just simply due to the Cape. But you got to sort of look at this and realize that the Guardians have done so well developing pitching over the last couple of years, several years at this point, that when you get guys in that have projectable traits, you trust this organization a little bit more to turn them into something, even if it's a longer process. And, I think when you're talking about prep pitchers as well, you really got to, attack a few different areas before you can do something about it.
With, did you end up seeing in the Cape any of the other college players they took in this class? Trying to think if any of those other ones ended up
Zask was out there.
Zask was out there this year, right?
I didn't see Zask out there this year, but I know the numbers were pretty good. I saw Rafe Schlesinger last year out of Miami. Lower slot, left-handed guy, interesting sort of movement. He's got some wiggle on all the pitches. He's interesting to me. I think it's probably more of a reliever arm, but just like one of these classic Guardians guys that comes out in like the 8th or 9th inning with like a weird slot and the ball moves funny. Like, I saw one today, and Jay Driver was, a year before that in the Cape, kind of similar. Just like interesting traits, good data, somebody that could turn into something. I want to say I saw Aiden Major a couple years ago, but I can't remember if I did or not. I know he had surgery this year. He's a little bit smaller. There is some stuff there. He's got a wicked slider that's got some pretty decent bite on it. So yeah, I saw a little bit of him. If I remember correctly, I'd have to go back a couple of years in my notes. I remember Schlesinger just because he's this big blonde left-hander with a weird slot. So kind of sticks out to you. Saw Jacob Cozart today.
Oh yeah.
In his first pro game, I believe. And I saw him a little bit on the Cape. It's a good bat. Like I've always thought the ingredients are there just in terms of like approach. The contact's not bad. There's good EVs. He's a bigger body. He's not the most athletic guy behind the plate. So it will be interesting to see how he progresses like as an actual catcher. Because I think that's kind of what one of the bigger question marks is he doesn't move super well, and he's not like, kind of twitchy, which I know is funny to say about catchers, but if you watch the good catchers, they're all a little bit twitchy, and there's not a lot of twitch there, but I think he can hit. So he's another one that I'm fairly familiar with and, saw quite a bit of. Oh, and then Cam Shelkey. I saw Cam Shelkey.
Yeah.
It's weird. It's funny because he's one of these guys that is a submariner, but will throw from an overhand slot every so often and kind of fool you with that. The Katuitt always has guys like this in the Cape. So he was like a Katuitt guy through and through. I think was there for a couple of years. And it kind of reminded Jackson Kelly's like kind of like that with the Rangers. They had Jackson Kelly before that. Another, it's kind of like maybe a better Alaska Abney type of deal where it's just like a really weird slot and maybe harder stuff than you expect from a submariner, but is kind of interesting. So yeah, I saw a little bit of him now, just kind of looking at the draft board. I sort of remembered that I had a decent amount of experience with Shelkey too. And then saw Sam Matson, but it's been a while. I don't remember his entire arsenal, honestly.
Yeah, well, one thing we know is the Guardians do love the Cape. There's, just so many examples of that up and down the board. We had some people try to tell us the Cape doesn't matter. I'm like, the Cape definitely matters. The Guardians definitely care about the Cape.
People like to tell us a lot of things. From there. Chase rates don't matter. BABIP is unimportant. The Cape, no one bothers with it. These are common refrains from people who wanted them to just draft big guy hit hard.
Yeah, I mean, but even then, a lot of those guys played in the Cape too.
Yeah,
I think it's a good litmus test. Just in terms of hitting with wood, it's super depressed run environments. So when guys do put up big numbers there, I think it means something still. The pitching quality isn't great, but the fact that they're hitting like rag balls and I mean, if I showed you the EVs from the Cape this year, you would gasp. I mean, it's like 7 mile per hour drops, 8 mile per hour drops on 90th percentile. And that's also going from metal to wood, but teams do adjust it down and then adjust it back up to what it would be in pro ball based on the Cape. So the EV numbers and like the power numbers are a little bit depressed. These are all, you have to remember, these parks are like more or less in the middle of the ocean too. I think people forget that. Like there's a marine layer factor. There's heavy air. There's weird high school parks that you're playing at that have funky dimensions. So that all plays a role in it.
Yeah, it's like playing in San Francisco on the Bay. We'll talk more about some of the guys that Geoff has seen in Lake County recently. We'll talk about some of the prospects in the system. And if time allows, I've got one specific question when it comes to the trade deadline. I think other Geoff wants or will know what I'm going to ask, but we'll see if we can fit that in here in the rest of today's show.
But first, let's talk about our friends over at PrizePicks. Right now, they're giving you one for free. That's right. They are giving you a free square. You just got to go over, look at MMA, look at Israel Adesanya, and they're saying that he's going to have 0.5 significant strikes. That's right. If you think he's going to have just one significant strike, in his matchup, which is in 72 hours as of recording, then you're going to win. And guess what? You can't even pick less. And the normal value here is 100.5 significant strikes. So they're giving you a free square. I don't know anything about MMA at all on any level, but I can still win because I just got to click more. That's how it works with our good friends over at PrizePicks. It is as simple as more or less. So download the app, go to the website, use the code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, download the app, go to the website, use the code LOCKEDONMLB, all lowercase, all one word, for a first deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy.
Check out all the Guardians action over the weekend in Milwaukee as they visit Geoff on your SiriusXM app. Just search Guardians.
I'll be there Saturday.
Yeah, so head over to American Family Field. Is insurance not
It's American Family Field, right?
Not Miller Park anymore?
No.
Oh, that's so disappointing. That's the guy who is like, Progressive Field, it's fine. Who cares? It's a ballpark. Wednesday. So we're recording this Wednesday. This is for Friday. So you got to see Ralphy Velazquez. You saw Cozart. Genao was in the lineup. You saw Tugboat. I just saw your video on Tugboat up there. Everybody in Cleveland wants to know, is this going to work with Tugboat? Like the everybody loves the story. Everybody loves. He looks like an everyman, and he's throwing 88, 90, and I know the approach angle on the fastball is really, really low, which is interesting. So I think everybody wants to know, for Tugboat, is it going to work? And then anything else you picked up on today that was interesting. I've been really impressed by Angel Genao in my looks this year.
Yeah, I mean, he hasn't ripped it up at the plate, but it's good at bats, switch hitter. It's a good swing from both sides. He attacks. He's made a couple of good plays in the field. He made a diving stab or a jumping stab over his head today on a hard hit line drive. That was a nice play. Moves pretty well out there. I think there's not much question that he's going to stick in the dirt. Haven't seen him really let loose on any plays from short, but the arm, from what I've seen, looks pretty good. Just seems like a good all-around ball player. I like him a lot. I think that this is maybe a more interesting Guardians style middle infielder with the hit tools there, can play defense, has a high baseball IQ. And I think I think you can project maybe a little bit more power than what you're getting from Rocchio, and just more of an everyday role than some of the guys that they've had that have come up in recent years as shortstop prospects. And, we know they've had quite a few of those guys. So I've been really impressed by him just in terms of just baseball IQ, acumen. A guy you can just pencil into the lineup every day and not have a question about it. And, I'm pretty sure I'm going to get him for a couple more games tomorrow because it seems like he plays every game. So
he does.
Maybe I'll catch him to, stinging a couple more balls. It's only been 2 games, but just overall, I think you can kind of see it any kind of, higher waisted, a little bit more athletic than I think I was expecting. See him in person. Not super stout or anything like that. There's maybe even a little bit more muscle projection, good weight that you could probably put in that frame in the next couple of years. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Ralphie, man, it's a loud barrel. He caught one last night for his first single. He's hit a couple of balls hard over the last couple of days. It's a really good swing, good approach. Not overly passive, but not super aggressive. He kind of has a good balance in terms of his plate approach, which I think is important with guys like this that do have power. You don't want him to chase like crazy, but there's a threshold that once you sort of meet that with contact and chase in zone whiff, it works. And, good angles, good power. It's not great at first base. I think defense is always going to be the biggest question mark with this guy. It's very much a bat first player. I don't think he's going to catch long term. I don't think that's even a question. So, we'll see how it plays out because it's a difficult profile. But he hits the ball as hard as just about anybody. And I'll say this, his batting practice at the Futures game was the best batting practice of anybody. JJ and I do this every year. We sit there and we actually map out and record every single home run that's hit and where it was hit to in the ballpark. We've done it since I've been at BA. I think JJ's done it way more years than that. But that's our job. We sit together during batting practice of the futures game, and we track where all of the home runs go. We total up who hit the most home runs. I think he hit the first or second most home runs, but the round was just outstanding. Like, he was just stinging everything in a big league park, you know? So he was one that definitely that stood out there too. So it was kind of my second time seeing Ralphie, but, you know, first like real game situations, and doesn't seem overmatched at all by high A. So I'm not too concerned there. You know, and then of course there's Bazzana, and then as you mentioned, Tugboat. Wilkinson's interesting, man. Like, dude can pitch. Like, I think that's the biggest thing. Forget about the velocity and the stuff and the fun nickname and the bad body. He just executes. Like, he carves guys up. He hits his spots. Even like his misses and the pitches he throws out of the zone seem to be with intent. You know, it's not often that it's just like him losing it. Like, there are a couple of those like over the given start, but I mean, he tossed 5 1/3 today, scoreless, allowed 2 hits, nothing really stung, walked a couple, but, you know, competitive at bats, struck out 6. Fastball sat 88 to 89. He scraped 90 a couple of times, but you wouldn't know it. You know, if you were watching that start without a gun, you'd be like, this guy's throwing 94, 95. It's just the reactions of the hitters. Guys react really late to it. It's got some kind of late arm side run. It's almost like 5-6 feet before the plate. It kind of dips out and downshifts, and it's on that flat angle, and just a lefty from that flat angle with a super efficient fastball shape, like, it's going to work. And he gets a lot of, like I said, gets a lot of arm side run in that thing. I think that's sitting behind home plate. That was the thing that stuck out to me the most, was how much that ran. And even the changeup, like, he doesn't throw the changeup a ton. It's not a swing and miss pitch for him, but I think you can look at that pitch and be like, that plays pretty well off of the fastball. Then you mix in the slider. He's got a really weird, like, horizontal approach angle on that thing. And so when you look at the numbers, it almost kind of looks like a gyro slider. It's like 3 and like 3.5 horizontal, 4.5 horizontal. But the way it comes out of the hand, it seems like it dips in a little bit more. And that it's kind of like the way that what's his name? Dude that was with the Dodgers for a bunch of years, that and the Angels. No, that's now with Texas. I'm like totally
Andrew Haney.
It's like how Andrew Haney's like sweeper works, where like on horizontal numbers, it doesn't look like a crazy sweeper, but the way it comes out of his hand because of like the horizontal approach angle and his slot, like, it plays up. And that's the same thing with Tugboat. It's a good pitch. Like, the slider's good. It plays off the fastball. He can backdoor that thing if he needs to lefties. You know, throw it off the plate to right-handers. Excuse me, front door to lefties, back door to righties. But like, it's an interesting pitch. You know, I don't know. It's somebody threw an Andrew Albers comp on him today. I didn't think it was too bad, like just a left-handed version of him. It's one of these guys that, like, he's going to be a big leaguer. It's just a matter of like what the role is. And I kept thinking, like, if this guy was at 2 to 4, I don't think you could hit him. Like, you know, like we see that with Seawald, right? Like, he's had a pretty good big league career as a reliever. And it's one of those things, like, he's got all these traits. He can get deep in the starts. He's pretty efficient. If that continues, that's really what like makes or breaks him as a starter. But because he's left-handed, because his angles are so weird on all of his pitches and his ability to throw strikes, I think like at worst you're looking at it like a specialist bullpen floor, maybe even like a swingman that can be like a setup guy in certain situations against like super, you know, heavy left-handed lineups, or, you know, a multi-inning reliever that comes in and can like do a bunch of different things. Like, there was a guy the Red Sox and the Cardinals had a bunch of years ago, Julian Tavares, and that was kind of what his role was. Like, he would start sometimes, and other times he was a long guy. Other times they used him in the 7th inning. Like, he could fit into that role too because his pitch shapes are so unique and he has, you know, pitch ability. And I think that's something that gets so underrated these days. We get so caught up in stuff, and you have all these guys with these crazy K rates. and they throw freaking 50 innings a year. And it's like, well, that's not going to work. You got to do that in 2 months in the big leagues. Like you can't get away with that. Like, and like, I love Ricky Tiedemann. That's the big question with Ricky Tiedemann. It's like, can he stay healthy? Noah Schultz. No, everyone wants to crown Noah Schultz as the best pitching prospect in baseball. He goes 3 to 4 innings every time out. It's great stuff. I'd love to see it go 5 to 6 to 7. Like you want to be a great big league starter. You got to be able to go 6 and 7 innings, right? Like that's the difference between guys that are number 5s and guys that are 3s, 2s, and 1s. And we start having those conversations. So despite him lacking the power, I kind of think that that's something that could come along in the coming years. Maybe it's never going to be 95 and 96, but if you have him sitting 1 to 3, 2 to 4, like that's really interesting. And he's not that old.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
He's not old for the level either.
And it's just that pathway with toning down, getting in shape, just also coming from a small school. There's a lot of pathways to seeing a guy.
And you want to keep him fat. Like I have this thing with pitchers where I'm like, I either want like a tall, skinny guy or like the dude who's built like a house like Lance Lynn, or maybe there's like something with like these fat guys like Bartolo Colon. Like it worked for a bunch of years. David Wells. Like, I don't know. Like
during the draft, I definitely sent text to Justin that my wife would have been confused about, where I was like, man, this pitcher's got the perfect butt. Like there's that thing about having that backside. If you spend enough time watching pitchers, you know exactly what I mean when I send that. But it's like, you're like, okay,
I've said
that's
that same
base.
thing to my wife.
Yeah. It's like you need that strong base.
Yeah, it feels like the guys that are always getting hurt are built like Noah Syndergaard, right? Like they lift too much and they rip up their bodies because they come too stiff. Like I think there's a pliability element with it, with like pitching that, I don't fully understand. I'm sure there's smarter people that work with pitchers that probably do. I don't know. I mean, I think he's an interesting arm. Like I saw Bruns today. I saw Martinez, who's a decent prospect with the Dodgers. He shoved, and it's like one of those guys where like he lulls you to sleep. Like you look up and you're like, crap, he's gone 5 innings already and hasn't allowed a run. Like it was like the first time I saw like Ken Waldichuk was like kind of like that. He ended up adding a bunch of power, but there's always these guys that just execute. And I think like you can't write that off, and he's done it at a pretty high level at this point. Like, his ERA is under 3 now and high A after maybe struggling a little bit like early and then kind of adjusting. Like it wasn't the dominance that he had in low A. At this point, it wouldn't shock me if he's in double A in the next week or two, if they want to push him up that high. Maybe they stay conservative, they keep him here, but Akron's close enough. It wouldn't shock me if they make that move, because I think he's probably ready for double A. He's better than most of the guys I've seen in double A this year, frankly. And honestly, the best pitcher I've seen in the Eastern League this year, if you don't count Louis Perales because he blew out when I was there, might be Carson Palmquist, who's like a weird left-hander who doesn't throw that hard. It's kind of in right now. Sean Sullivan,
Yeah.
We got some weird lefties that don't throw that hard work. Angle on the fastball, man. It does matter.
It does, yeah. I like Sean Sullivan a year ago. I was bummed about that one.
You were sad when he went to the Rockies.
That one. Yeah. Going a little extra long today on Friday, a special episode with Geoff Pontes from Baseball America. While you're listening to the episode, make sure you are hydrating with Liquid IV. And the popsicle firecracker favorite is the summertime hit when you're talking America's pastime. It is an important time of year to hydrate. You got, still baseball going on if you're at baseball games. High school football, 2-a-days are starting up. The season's going to start here anytime soon. It's an important time of year to keep hydrating. So Terrapure, Live More, 1 stick and 16 ounces of water hydrates better than water alone. They are powered by LIV Hydro Science. They're optimized for a ratio of electrolytes, essential vitamins, clinically tested nutrients to turn ordinary water into extraordinary hydration. No more thirsty summers when you indulge in hydration with Liquid IV. 20% off your first order of Liquid IV when you go to liquidiv.com. Use code lockdown or use code MLB at checkout. 20% off your first order when you shop better tasting hydration today using promo code MLB at liquidiv.com. All right, we're back. So a couple more questions we had for Geoff before we get out of here on a Friday episode. So another player people want to know a lot about in the Guardian system is CJ Kayfus. You've got a lot of history with him in the Cape, and then you saw him a little bit after he's promoted to AA this year. Not a ton of power in college. He's hitting for a lot of power as a pro. Is this something that you think is sustainable? Is it just optimizing, pulled fly ball like the Guardians have been talking about lately, or for a while now, I should say?
He's kind of the king of that. Because I'll say the EVs are not super, super high here. It's below average bat speed. We're talking about his 90th percentile exit velocities around 102.3. Max this year is 107. But 382 ex Wobacon. And so that tells me, and you can kind of go into some of the pulled air numbers, etc. Really high. He backspins it really efficiently. He catches barrels on a consistent basis. And it's kind of similar to Kyle Manzardo, where the EVs weren't nuts, but he hit the ball hard a lot. There's a lot of balls that are stung between 89 miles an hour and 100 miles an hour with this guy. It's a 40% hard hit rate, 95 plus rate, which is pretty good. But I think if you even look at where the cluster of his EVs are, he's going to be one of these guys with not super high ends, but a higher average for what the 90th or what the max exit velocity is. So that probably limits the upside. It's not a 30 home run bat, but if this is an 18 to 22 home run guy that hits for average, gets on base, I think that's a pretty good bat to have. It's just they have a few guys like that in the organization. It's a really interesting profile. And that's not to say that he couldn't add strength in the next couple of years and those EVs tick up a little bit, and then that kind of makes the difference. But it's a really good hit tool with enough power, and I just think he's one of these guys that catches efficient barrels. It's kind of this theory that I've had for a while. Guys like Alex Bregman, Mookie Betts, Joey Votto, that always kind of overperform the EVs. And some of that is they just don't topspin the ball very often. Where if you look at guys with huge EVs, the best EVs in the game, there's a lot of guys that hit a high number of ground balls. It's not just Vlad Jr. It's guys like James Wood. Judge's rate I think might be not as high as it used to be. Stanton obviously hits a fair amount of topspin line drives and topspin ground balls. We've seen Yanni Diaz doing that for years with the high EVs. So I think that's just kind of hand in hand with the territory. When you hit the ball hard, you're not always going to catch it really efficiently. Where Kayfus is somebody where I think when we start to understand ball flight a little bit more, the way that we understand, at least from the hitter's perspective and a batted ball perspective, teams are already digging in on this stuff and probably know a lot more. So if there's any team guys who are out there listening to this, they're probably I already know about this. But I think guys that backspin it at lower spin rates, so it's this sort of mid-tier spin rates, and I couldn't tell you what that is. I haven't looked at enough of it. But those guys tend to catch more efficient barrels, and the ball moves more efficiently, almost like a four seam. Guys that have invisiballs or have the ability to generate a lot of unexpected ride on their fastballs because they have spin efficiency, which is a number, or active spin is what I think it is on StatCast. There's a few different terms. Spin efficiency, I think, is what you'll see on the actual TrackMan devices or Rapsodos and that sort of thing. And I just think Kayfus is one of these guys that almost those pitchers with those efficient four seamers kind of does the same thing with a barrel. He just has good angles. He's got good posture. He consistently just catches flush barrel contact. And I think that's going to allow him to continue to hit for power despite not having a ton of physicality or a ton of raw power. It's game power that actually plays up a little bit. So I think that's interesting. It'd be great if he could play third base or corner outfield or something like that. But, he's a good, solid defensive first baseman that can hit. He's not going to strike out. He's going to give you good at bats and, can crush mistakes. So, Yeah, I don't think the upside's super high, but I do think it's a major leaguer, and it's tough to write off a guy with a hit tool like this as soon as he enters pro ball and say, oh, he can't get stronger, because, adding velocity, adding strength are two things with pitchers and hitters that teams have kind of figured out. They know how to do that. If it's there if it's there to be taught or coaxed out of a player, they tend to figure out a way to do it.
Yeah, Guardians are definitely one of those. I know we don't have a ton of background, a lot of time left here either, too. But in the offseason, you got a piece about high exit velocity guys coming from complex leagues, and Luis Morejo was on that list, and he is crushing things in Lynchburg right now. I don't know how much you can really talk about him, but I'm super intrigued. I got to be honest. Like I don't trust complex league stats. I don't trust low A stats, but the data looks great so far.
The numbers are great. I mean, the EVs are outstanding. 90th percentile this season. This is complex and low A. 106.2. He's hit multiple balls, 112 this year. His max exit velocity is just about 113. It's
wow.
That's a lot for people who don't know. That's huge.
Yeah, it's plus bat speed. The bat speed numbers that I've seen would grade as like a 60 grade bat speed or just abouts. Really good swing decisions. The contact is like average-ish, fringe average-ish. There's a little bit of swing and miss in the zone, but when you swing like this and you make that kind of contact, but it's not like egregious. It's above like a 70% contact rate overall. In zone, it's just a little bit below 80%, which is kind of what my threshold is. The thing is, like, it's a low chase rate. He doesn't chase. So he's somebody that you can kind of look at the numbers. I've seen some videos of the swing. Powerful, still a little bit projectable. Like, it's interesting. I don't know a whole lot in terms of where he's going to fit defensively or like what that's going to look like long term. But it's definitely an interesting bat. And I guess kudos to me for picking that one out last year, digging on the data.
Yeah, I mean,
sometimes those guys are crap.
And I was like, wow,
like, oh, this looks really good, and then you're like, well, yeah, but who knows if it's going to work once he's like off the complex? Because there's still limited video. Like, you can watch some DSL games if you find the right stream on YouTube, but overall, it's sort of hard to find that. But I mean, it's a slightly open swing. Hits the ball hard. Good bat speed, like I said. I think the ingredients are there for him to be a really good player.
I'm excited. All right, last thing, we'll make this quick before we get out of here. A lot of people have been like saying like, oh, the Guardians should trade for Randy Arozarena instead of Lane Thomas, and I mean, I guess they could have, but I think people didn't understand how good this package was for Randy Arozarena, and it would have been hard to beat. I know you were super high on the two guys that went, and there's also another guy that might be in this trade too. Or there is another guy, we just don't know who.
Yeah, there's another guy to come too. So I think that's somewhat of a question mark. I really like Aiden Smith, and I think the world is waking up to what Brody Hopkins is. I was screaming this from the rooftops going into the draft a couple years ago, when he transferred to Winthrop. Super athlete, might have 6 different pitch types, frankly. And there's a bunch of them that could be above average to plus. I think the fastball's going to end up above average or plus. It's a really good slider. Shows a good curveball. He's got a good changeup. It's just a really deep mix with like starter traits. And I believe like in terms of the athletic testing that the Mariners did internally with like their prospects, so their minor league organization. I don't have a major league athletic testing, or even if they do that. He was the number 1 athlete in the organization that was still left. Darren Bowen was the other guy that tested well. They traded away Darren Bowen. I think Brody Hopkins has athleticism and just better feel the pitch than Bowen does. So that was a really good piece. I think teams rate him a lot higher than he's ranked on industry lists. And I kind of kicked and screamed to get him up the Rays list. And it sounds like the reports we're getting from scouts over the next couple of weeks, it wouldn't shock me if he moves up even more. And maybe it's even like a back end of the top 100 candidate if he pitches well enough. Aiden Smith, another super athlete, plus a double plus runner, plus in center field. EVs are good. He's got contact. He's got some approach. Kind of checks all the boxes. another guy that was like another one of my guys. So I love the trade. Like as soon as I saw that, I was like, oh, that's a really smart return. Like that's a team that like scouted heavily, had good feedback. And that's the thing, like the Rays may get knocked for not spending like on salary. I believe they have the second or third biggest scouting department after like the Dodgers and the Yankees. So they scout, they spend money on scouting and player development. And I think that's kind of how they keep this mechanism working of like bringing in good stuff and then trading players away and then getting back more good players and then just building the system back up again. And then there's a third player. And from what I've been told, it's going to be a prospect of note. It's not going to be like a top 25 guy, but an interesting player in that system. And there's plenty of interesting players in that system. Could the Guardians have gotten this done? Maybe. I don't know if they have two guys kind of remaining in the system that without having to trade away from like the Bazzana, oh, you wouldn't trade Bazzana, but like Delauder, Velazquez, Manzardo, Genao, Churio. You know, it would have been from that next tier. And I just don't think like Kayfus or like Wilbin Francesca and, you know, Parker Messick get that done. Like, I don't think that's the trade that's there. I don't think they probably would have been that crazy about Cooper Ringel, though I think he's a really good player. But talk about insane plate skills. So I just think they got beat. I think like the public looks at where these guys rank on even like our lists. Our lists aren't always perfect. And there's internal discussion that I might have ranked the Mariners differently than Austin does, or JJ would have ranked the Mariners differently than me and Austin. So I think like that's the difficult part is like us trying to have those internal conversations, some back and forth, the feedback and the scouts and the front office people that we're talking to with these different clubs and opposing teams and what their opinions are on these players. And there might be another 5 to 10 contacts that we don't have or we're not talking to that have a really high opinion of these players and might be right. So I think like the variance within the industry behind the scenes, especially after like the top 25 prospects, it's a crapshoot just in terms of what people's opinions are going to be. I mean, I could talk to 3 scouts today on one player. One guy could really like the bat and wonder if, you know, he's going to catch. Another guy could be like, no, I think he can catch, but I'm a little worried that he's not going to get to his power. And then another guy that's like, I don't think he can catch and the hit tool stinks, so he's not going to get to his power. And it can be the same player and I can have 3 completely different conversations with like opposing scouts that have, you know, covered the minor leagues professionally for 15 to 20 years. There's just so much variance there. And I think that was the disconnect in this trade because I saw a lot of reactions that were like, that's all they had to pay for Randy Arozarena, and they're quoting numbers from Pipeline or from us or whoever. And it's like, you know, the difference between 5 and 10 in the Mariner system or 10 and 22, it's not that great. Like it's a very small difference. And it's honestly like a pick 'em in terms of like you choose your own adventure and like which players you like better or who you've gotten better feedback on, who you've seen more of, you know, who's performing at that point. Like all that stuff gets worked into these lists and they're not perfect. And the other thing is like, we don't have access to information on medicals. We don't. No matter what information I get, I might hear things. I can check in the system. I can hear something through the grapevine, but we don't have access to player medicals the way that teams do, particularly when it comes to like the draft and some of these young players. And then the other part of it is makeup. We don't really know what that guy's like in the locker room, what he's like with his teammates, how he interacts with his coaches, how well he takes coaching, you know, how hard he works in the off season. Because all these guys have different personalities. Like to throw an example out there, we're at the Futures game and I'm talking to Kyle Teal and Roman Anthony. And both of them are looking forward to, after, you know, the Futures game, flying back home to Florida and California, respectively, spending a little time with the family for a couple of days, and then shooting back out, you know, to Portland. And Meyer said it on the the Foul Territory show, but Kyle Teal, the day before he leaves for the Futures game, they're in Hartford, like starts talking to the Red Sox organization people that were around. He's like, hey, after the Futures game, can I fly to Florida and like hit off the trajectory machine for 3 days? Like he just wanted to face, he wanted to face Garrett Crochet and see if he could hit it. Like there's just different work ethics. And I can't say that Meyer's approach is wrong for him or for his body type, or Teal's approach is wrong for him or his body type, or whatever he's trying to work through. I think that's all part of it. And it's like, how well is the organizational fit? And I think kind of going full circle here, that's similar to the conversation we had on Travis Bazzana and the Guardians. It's just like, it was a good organizational fit. And, I think that's the type of stuff when it comes to pro scouts, area scouts, they do a really good job of doing the detective work. Like the information's there. You can watch pretty much any level of baseball, every swing from 4 or 5 different angles. If you're inside some of these systems, you can video scout if you wanted to. Scouts love to see players. They want to take notes on players. They want to turn in notes and reports on players. But often the most important thing, whether it's the draft or on the trade deadline, the most important job for scouts is to find out about the medicals, find out about the person, find out about the guy in the clubhouse, what he's like off the field, and just any of the additional baggage or positives and how that's going to fit in with your culture. And I think the public, there's a huge disconnect with that, because there even is with us, like with me and other writers, we just don't have access to it. And like, we hear a lot of things, and it doesn't mean that all of it's true, or a guy's not going to work out because, he skipped classes like every Friday to go hang out with his girlfriend, 3 states away in college or something. Like, we don't know that sort of stuff. And like, some people might say, no, he's a bad fit for our organization. Another team might be like, who gives a crap? Like, I don't care if he's going to, his calculus class on Friday afternoon. Like, I want a guy that's a dog that wants to play, and we know that he's that. So I think there's so many other ingredients and stuff that goes into it that, like, when I saw people react to that trade and then people being like, oh, we could have topped that. We could have topped that. And it's like, maybe you don't want to. And that's the other part of it. Arizona's looked really good. He had a really rough first 6 weeks or so of the season where he was kind of lost. But I think with him, you're going to start to see some of that athleticism atrophy, and he does not have skills to fall back on. Like, it's not great. Like, it's gotten better this year. The swing and strike rate's down, strikeout, all that sort of stuff. But he's not a great defender. I mean, he's a pretty bad defender in left field. I think people saw him make a couple of plays in the WBC and think he's a good defender. Not that Lane Thomas is a great defender, but he's a bad defender in left field. And he's got juice, kind of runs a little wildly. I kind of wonder if he's going to stop running. And then all of a sudden you got this guy in arbitration, you're paying his biggest years, and it's atrophying a little bit. And we saw the beginning of it, at the start of this year. He's kind of come on strong. He's been really, really good with Seattle since he got traded there. So I think some of it was not locking yourself in and getting kind of a similar player in Lane Thomas. I mean, you can look at the home run numbers that he put up in 2023. I don't know if he approaches that again. It's certainly down this year, but kind of a similar player, and you paid a smaller bounty for him. So I don't know. Take your win. You have the best team in baseball right now, right? Like, while we're recording this, they have the best record in baseball. Take the W here. And you didn't have to gut your farm system.
No, agreed. It so much. I mean, everything there, 100% agreement. If you can get 80% and pay 25%, then you got to do that.
Yeah, I think you do.
We have taken so much of Jeff's time. He's got 14 more innings to watch tomorrow. We cannot take any more. We want to thank you all who joined us today. Remember to rate and review, put in the comments what you liked. Hey, maybe put some questions down, and we'll save those for the future. We can maybe pepper Jeff with some fan questions, as he is
Jeff
now our
time to give us.
He is now our most returned guest, our most senior guest. I think that is officially his title.
Champ now. So go subscribe to Baseball America, so Jeff will be coming back to talk to us.
And make sure you're following him. Give him a nice little bump.
Feed my kids.
At Geoff Pontes BA, if you're listening to the audio. Otherwise, it's on the screen. Thank you all again for being part of the Locked On Guardians team, being everydayers. We appreciate it. Hope you appreciate the extra long podcast today, and go Guardians, go.